From WSL Pure, this is One Ocean. Hey everyone, this week we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn how surfing is empowering women and youth in under-resourced coastal communities, how small-scale fishing communities are being affected by a changing ocean, and in general, how Emi Koch founded Beyond the Surface International, her nonprofit that you'll hear about in just a second. Emi's roots are in Southern California, where she grew up surfing, even riding for Billabong for a while. But nowadays, in her role as a Fulbright National Geographic Digital Storytelling Fellow, she's essentially nomadic. She works some of the year in Peru, she works some of the year in Vietnam, where she was when we recorded this conversation, and wherever else her work takes her. Emi works in some of the most under-resourced communities in the world. These are communities that already don't have a lot and are now losing even more as a result of climate change, overfishing, and our changing oceans. And yet, Emi is still full of optimism. She's full of energy, and she's always an inspiration. Every time we catch up, I feel energized, and I hope you pick up some of that stoke in this conversation with our WSL Pure ambassador, Emi Koch. Emi, it's really great to connect, and I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. You have such an incredible sort of background. You are a National Geographic Adventure of the Year. You're a former pro surfer. You started a nonprofit. You've done all this amazing work. But I always love to ask, who are you? How do you define yourself?
That's an amazing question. And well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And to describe myself, I think I'm just someone who is really passionate about this interaction we have between being humans and the planet that we live on, and especially the ocean that is our, biggest life support system here. So I think I found different avenues to explore that, and I'm also someone who's really passionate about meeting people and getting to know them sort of beyond the surface. So I do, I guess,
no plug there at all, beyond the surface.
Yeah, I guess I am someone who wears a lot of hats, but I haven't really focused on the hat wearing. It's more of just the idea of this enables me to live this passion of mine, and yeah, so I think that's that's how I would describe myself.
Well, the thread that I think struck us, and when I say us, I mean our team here at WSL Pure, we were kind of, looking at all of your background, and I know you, and we have, some friends in common and all that, but looking at all your background and seeing what the common thread was between all these different hats that you wear, right? And the one that we thought was interesting is how this former sort of pro surfer, because you were a sponsored surfer, right, for Billabong?
Yeah, I was, but Billabong actually, thanks to Billabong, I actually approached Billabong with the idea of using surfing as this tool for social good and through a sponsorship, as opposed to me competing or anything like this. I was on the lifestyle team, so my lifestyle would be working with kids in these marginalized and remote, coastal communities and using surfing as that tool. So it was actually thanks to Billabong that got, Beyond the Surface off the ground. So through their sponsorship, I was able to really work with these different communities.
Yeah, and that's a thread we picked up on, is that you used surfing as this way to empower and work with these impoverished coastal communities. And we just thought that was so interesting. And so I guess Beyond the Surface would be the kind of first step in that whole thing. So what is Beyond the Surface, and how'd you get to the name? Because I am curious, about what is Beyond the Surface? How'd you get there?
Sure. Well, when I first started Beyond the Surface, it was just the idea of using sort of any standing or any leverage I had within the surf industry or the surf scene, because I was pursuing a career as a professional surfer and whatnot, but it was using, instead of just being, I guess, another blonde, blue-eyed surfer girl from California, I thought it was way more interesting to see how, connect with kids who are participating in these grassroots surfing or for youth empowerment programs in these communities to get recognized or sponsored for their talents. And I could sort of be the middleman, I guess, between the surf industry and these grassroots communities that are just focused on running their programs, and I could kind of help promote them. So that's sort of how it started. And I had met a group of skateboarders actually from this organization called Skatistan that uses skateboarding as a tool for girl empowerment in Afghanistan. Apparently there's a law against women riding bicycles, but not against skateboarding. So I had met these guys and I was so inspired by them, and I wondered if anyone was doing this with surfing. And so I connected with these 3 surf clubs that were just kind of getting started, one in Peru, one in South Africa, and one in India. And I asked if they wanted anyone that could help kind of like promote the amazing work that they were doing. And so, I was 19 and I was just so excited by this idea. And so I bought a book on like how to start a nonprofit for dummies. And I think I read the first couple pages and then I was like, oh, we need a really cool name. And so I like play on words. And so I was just playing.
Wait, hang on. Before you get into the name, I want to go back there.
Yeah.
One, the part where you were 19 when you started this, which is incredible. And 2, the part where you got the book Nonprofits for Dummies, but did you ever finish reading it, or did you just do the first couple pages?
No, I never actually finished reading it. I mean, I'd say I'm a really I guess, yeah, I could describe myself as being very passionate, and people have diagnosed that as having ADHD, which I have tried to play in my favor, but
you dove right in. You're brave, put it that way. It's just bravery.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're 19. Did you went to college though? And I know this because you actually went to school with my wife, Annie.
Yeah. I actually met Annie right when I started Beyond the Surface, actually. So I had taken a year off from university actually to sort of figure out what I wanted to do. I in high school, I wanted to be a professional surfer. I think, having some learning disabilities, my hyperactivity was sort of in the classroom, a bit dismissed, and maybe, they had asked me to settle down, but surfing or competing in surfing, it was like celebrated that I could move so quickly. And so I thought, well, I'd rather pursue a career as a professional surfer than sitting at a desk. But I had a bit of a change of heart, and I realized that, I was in a socioeconomic position to be able to go to university, and I had heard in high school that there was a statistic that if the world was comprised into a village of 100 people, just one person in that village would have the opportunity to go to university. And I guess I got really excited by that idea as well.
So hang on. I want to make sure we tease that out.
Oh,
so
sure.
You said... No, you're good. I just want to, that sounds like a really important point in your story and your change of heart, which is you heard that out of 100 people, only one of those people on the planet would go to university. So 1%. Yeah,
1%. And that coincided with a trip that I did in high school to, growing up in San Diego. That's San Diego, California, right along the border. I had not really gone to the other side of the border until I was in high school, and that really popped this bubble that I had, Southern California bubble that I had been living in, and just to see the poverty that was existing on the other side of this wall that was sort of out of sight and out of mind, that really struck a chord with me. And I remember being on the other side of the wall and looking over at downtown San Diego, and from where we were on the other side of the wall, we were in a garbage dump that was actually a community, like people were living there. And I had just thought, wow, like I grew up over there. I was, maybe 16 at this time, and I had never imagined that, within my even sight on the other side of this wall, that people could be living in these conditions. And so that really was the turning point for me. And I think I wrote just some really heartfelt college essays, because definitely my SAT scores were not going to cut it. And I got into university, and at first I was at George Washington University in the International Affairs School. So that was sort of the school for, channeling people into the State Department or a career in diplomacy.
And was that because you wanted to work in politics? Did you think you wanted to go down that route, or was it so that you could help people? What was motivating that? Yeah, so I was under the impression that diplomats were like humanitarian aid workers, and that was, this pursuit of okay, I'm going to save the world, but I think, first of all, going to Washington, D.C. from kind of growing up on the beach was quite a shocker. And I also think that I
zoomed way out before, pursuing professional surfing. You're so focused on your career, and it's really yourself and, promoting your passion and your sport and all this, but your world is sort of narrowed to kind of look at you. And I think when I had this epiphany of like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out here, and so much to do for social justice and whatnot. I zoomed way out to see the whole world and all of its issues, and I totally lost sight of where I fit in that picture. So I ended up taking a year off to reevaluate, and it was actually, I went back to San Diego, but it was the first time that I was, kind of out of the surf scene because I had taken time off from that. I was also now not a student, and so it was like, wow, like who am I really, and what do I want to do? I've got all this passion, but I don't know where to put it and what it looks like, what shape it takes. So it was during that time I met this group of skateboarders, and that was actually in Nepal.
You were in Nepal, right?
Yeah, it was in Nepal. I had worked a bit, just at some coffee shops.
What a wild thing! You just keep going to places away from surf. It seemed, like I'm gonna go to DC, I'm gonna go to Nepal, like just far, far away, even though it's something you're passionate about,
yeah.
And yet it's helped you on this path.
Well, it's wild because actually in Nepal, kind of like the furthest from sea level is where I felt most connected with my passion for the ocean. But it was there that I met these skateboarders, and they shared what they had been doing in Afghanistan, and I was like, wow, and it just kind of put everything in perspective of like, oh well, this is me, like this is where I fit in this picture. And then I think that this could go into a different, avenue, but I think that when people take what they're really passionate about and they use that as a mechanism to do good, and not from this standing of like putting, I'm on this pedestal and, I'm doing charity work. It's not like that. It's just like sharing, like, yeah, let's go surfing, and like, from that camaraderie, good things happen. I mean, we all have friends. It's great when we're going surfing with our friends. And I think it's like, so if, you're really into knitting or you're really into like chocolate making or something, like I think the coolest thing that a human can do is just figure out how to leverage that for doing something beyond the actual act, but doing that as a mechanism to leave the world, better than you found it.
Okay, so you then start Beyond the Surface International. What is the core mission?
So our core mission is to engage local youth through the power of play, creativity, and science to address social and ecological issues that impact their fishing communities and the marine environment. So the fishing aspect came a bit later for me. It was really just focused on the surfing and coastal communities where these grassroots, surfing for youth empowerment projects were happening.
And you mentioned Peru, South Africa, and India as your first three locations, right?
Yep, exactly. And this was sort of a time before Facebook or whatnot. So it was a bit difficult, I think, for these community-based organizations to really get their messages out and, secure sponsorships and whatnot. But I had the idea that like, okay, well, I went back to university and I transferred to Georgetown, and I switched up my majors and and I thought, okay, well, during the school year I can work to secure grants or fundraise for these organizations and create like a little network. And then that's what I approached Billabong with, this idea. And then through Billabong support during the summers, I could actually go and work on the ground with these organizations, teaching surfing and working with the kids to make their own, GoPro had just come out, so we got sponsored by a GoPro, and beforehand I was filming the kids on like a little Kodak, waterproof handheld camera and getting hit by surfboards. And so it was great when GoPro came out because the kids could film themselves, and that was also really, really cool for them and like empowering for them to be able to tell their own story.
Very cool. And I mean, such great initiative for someone still in college and still trying to figure things out. I mean, I love that you just said, I'm going to do this and figure it out. And, like I'll read part of the book and then just dive right in. Yeah. And so you've done work now with like Waves for Development, right?
Yes.
And Surfers Not Street Children in South Africa, or is it a different group?
Yeah, they originally were on Tombo, and now they are Surfers Not Street Children. Yes.
Yeah. And then in India, the project is which one?
Kovalam Surf Club. So my first summer, I was a sophomore. I went to Peru. The second, as a junior, I went to South Africa. And then I kind of saved India to the end because I thought I wanted to sort of be there a bit longer. And I ended up, when I graduated university, I spent roughly 2 years in India and working with the Kovalam Surf Club, but also with a couple other surfing initiatives there as well.
Very cool. And I want to come back to your time in India, but I want to quickly hit on Peru and South Africa because I'm lucky enough to have also participated in Waves for Development and been in Libidos and volunteered there. And I think we found out about it. I think my wife found out about it through you probably a long time ago. And it was on our radar. So we met, Dave and the team, and we kind of were fans of what they were doing. So what were you doing in each of these places? I mean, it's engaging with the kids, empowering them through getting them in the water. Are you teaching them the local language? Are you teaching them about the marine ecology? What are kind of the activities? Yeah,
so originally it was, I was also quite focused on getting girls surfing, which it's difficult. They face a lot of barriers. It's, the outside is more like a guy's territory, and women are more in the household or, learning how to cook or these sorts of things. So it was also engaging the girls to get them in the marine environment as well. But we started to also do some different upcycling initiatives with the plastic pollution. So it's really like a dynamic thing. It was accompanying the kids into the water and using some of my surf training to engage them and help with their skills. But it was also I think when parents give you their kids and you bring them back alive and happier than when they left the house, like that really builds like a relationship with families. And so I think it was also really about community engagement and just a chance to, it was no longer like me coming in as this foreigner to, help. It was like we are a team, and families would, we would eat dinner together, and they would share what issues they were facing. And it was an opportunity for me as well just to think, okay, this is like a solidarity, like let's go figure out these solutions together. So each experience was a bit different, but mainly I was, teaching surfing and then trying to also start some ocean literacy programs.
That's so cool. I want to hit on two threads there. I want to come back to being a foreigner and engaging in the community, but first wanted to note the girls in the marine environment and getting girls out in the surf and the outdoors. I mean, that was one that was so tangible for me in my experience at Libitos. There was one day, we were doing surf lessons, and you have all these young boys who are so amped and frothy to grab whatever surfboards they can and get out there, but the girls always seemed to hang back.
Yes.
And they kind of stayed on the beach, or maybe they dipped a toe, and it was very rare that they would really get out in the water. And that's where I was. This moment is to this day like such a cool, proud moment, seeing Annie go over, and she just went, well, I'm not just going to give lessons to the boys.
Yeah.
And she just went over to the girls and was like, hey, do you want to do this? Can I help you? And just kind of engaging these young girls. And I have these amazing photos that she just grabbed a couple of the girls and went off and taught her own little women's surf lesson, which I thought was so just cool. The girls just loved it. They, she was holding their hand. She was showing them that it was okay, that they could be, in charge of themselves and go out and surf and have fun just like the boys. And I just thought that was one of the coolest moments. And I think that's so important, as we all know, like empowering women and girls is one of the best things we can do for the planet in general. Yes. And we should just be doing it, period, because it's the right thing. But it's also a really good thing for the planet. So it's just
cool.
Important work.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, I mean, really, if when you said the word, the words hanging back, like if 50% of your community is hanging back or hanging just inside the household, like we're not going to get very far. We need like everybody on board. And, right now, actually in Libitos, like we have really spearheaded this program with, my with Beyond the Surface, and maybe this gets into a little bit later, but the evolution of Beyond the Surface, but also like our participatory storytelling program, Coast to Coast. We're really focused on working with the girls there through this project called Women in Water. So the way that we work, I should say, is that if someone wants to come on board with Beyond the Surface and do something, we usually ask like, well, what are you interested in? And because I think if you want want to see any social or ecological issue happening, like in challenge happening on the ground, like go to a small scale fishing community. All that they're experiencing, like probably the biggest challenges I think that humanity has faced in terms of climate change and depleting ocean and whatnot. So 2 years ago, Sarah Hauser, who's this incredible professional windsurfer and just like one of my favorite humans, she contacted us through the Girls from the Changing Tides Foundation and asked, she was coming down to Peru to compete in a windsurfing competition, and she wanted to do something a little bit beyond the surface while she was there. And so I asked, well, what are you passionate about, or what issues are you passionate about? And she had mentioned, water, sanitation, and hygiene, and also engaging with girls. And so from that conversation, we went to the community and asked, what sort of challenges are you facing in terms of, water scarcity and whatnot. And, you've been to Lobitos, like it's a desert. And so water is
super dry.
So dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the desert just kind of like fell into the ocean. And so water is sort of pumped into that community. But the way I sort of think of it is like, it's sort of an afterthought because they are, it's a small scale fishery. Maybe they're not contributing as much to the big economy. So, they're kind of just like, okay, well, they need water twice a week. But so, and that water is not potable. And so, a lot of the families will either boil that water or just not drink as much water. A lot of the kids just drink like juice, and it's usually like with a lot of sugar and stuff. So we had this idea of pairing girls surfing classes with actually somehow addressing this issue about water scarcity. And so it's going back to your story with Annie, I think it's once you get a group of girls together and they've got just someone who is a woman who and it, beyond that we're so different maybe with our socioeconomics or the way we look and whatnot, it's just this sisterhood, like this camaraderie of like, no, let's go in together. And because if the boys can be pretty, like, how to say, yeah, they definitely do a good job of making it known that, like, in this machismo kind of way that, like, this is our space. And for the girls, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll go back inside. And so, yeah, Women in Water were really like, it's like become this gender responsive approach to addressing the water. It's a crisis that is Lobitos is experiencing. And so we're able to work with the girls and their moms that are really in charge of water management for a household. And through surfing, the girls are, finding their outer strength and also the kind of the inner strength and be able to be these kind of change makers in their community.
That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. It's such empowering work that you're doing, and I think it will go a long way. It's one of those things that maybe it seems small scale, but it's going to have these kind of ripple effects where that community gets empowered and grows, and then the next generation continues to follow in those footsteps, hopefully.
And we just
go ahead.
We only had 4 girls interested 2 years ago, and now I just got a picture sent from my partner Nico, who's there running the project at the moment, and he and there's about 40 girls in this photo, so it's definitely
Whoa.
Yeah, it's so cool. You and Annie definitely have to come back.
I would love to. Peru is amazing. Hey, a quick break from our conversation to give a shout out to Outerknown. They sponsor this podcast because they care about the ocean too. That's shown in their clothing, which is all made from organic cotton, recycled and regenerated fibers, doesn't use a lot of water in the process or dyes, and is made by people who are paid a fair wage. I love their stuff. I'm rocking an Outerknown t-shirt that my wife gave me right now. It's super comfy, stylish, durable, and I feel good knowing that it was made responsibly. Outerknown was actually founded by pro surfer and 11-time world champion Kelly Slater, who was determined to create a clothing company who made clothing responsibly. And you don't have to be a surfer to wear Outerknown. It's really stylish. They have great threads for men and women, and you can go to outerknown.com today and enter the code OCEAN at checkout, and you'll get 25% off your full price order. That's outerknown.com, outerknown.com. And remember to use the code OCEAN at checkout for 25% off. Check them out today, outerknown.com, and don't forget, promo code OCEAN for 25% off. Now, back to our conversation. So you touched on a couple of things there, and I want to come back to. And one was sisterhood and the idea of putting a group of women together and empowering them. And I do think in the surf world that is super empowering. It is typically a male dominated sport, and so I know oftentimes when Annie and I paddle out in a lineup, she's the only woman out there, and I can only imagine what that feels like to ever be the only, whether you're the only woman or only minority, just being underrepresented is always tough. And so two things. One, with that power of sisterhood, you went to India and you were part of a project that was pretty special, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we're talking, which was Beyond the Surface, the film, which is part of the WSL's Transform series, that we're helping reshare that story. And two, the feeling of being that minority in the reverse, for you going to India and being a, blonde hair surfer girl from California.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question is, how do you get in touch, and how do you create that relationship and trust with the local communities that you're engaging with to get them to say, yeah, cool, you understand me, or we can work together, or we trust you? How do you avoid that sort of dropping in and being like, hey, we're here to help, but I don't really know how to help anyway? And how do you go beyond that surface level interaction? And then two, please do tell us more about the film, and people will get a taste of it through the Transform series, but I would encourage people to watch the whole thing. So
well, to answer your first question, I think what I've learned along the way is just going into a community, it's almost like you're going into someone's house, like they've invited you over for dinner, and you sort of use the same etiquette as you would if you were invited over to dinner to someone's house for the first time. It's like the same sort of etiquette, and you would never barge into someone's front door and just be like, hi, like I think you should rearrange the furniture, like oh, this food that you're cooking, you should do it a different way. Like you wouldn't.
You haven't met my mother. I've literally seen her do both of those things, but it's with good intent. But
right. So
it's not. She's just like, have you considered rearranging this? Because I think it would really in the sunlight and da da da.
Right. But like,
okay. But anyway, yes, most normal people would not tell someone to rearrange the furniture.
Well, Continue. And like, how well did that go over? Did they rearrange the furniture or? So I think that's definitely the first approach I take, and people, like, we're just humans, like, and for sure you can tell if somebody has ulterior motives, or they, and definitely, like, local communities are not, willing to just trust someone outright, because they have been through a lot. I mean, we're talking about, coastal communities were the first to get impacted by colonialism and imperialism and whatnot. So
of course,
there's just a long history there. So, and as I mentioned, like, I think I've always engaged with the community through like a trusted channel, whether that's a school or it's this community project that has grown from the community. And so it's not just kind of randomly showing up, and I'm sort of showing up within a context that they already sort of trust, but then trusting me as a person. I think that comes with taking their kids and taking them to a place that in a lot of cultures is quite scary, and many people in communities have drowned in the ocean and whatnot. So to take them and for the parents to see their kids just having the time of their life, like, and then coming back home safely, that definitely builds a lot of trust and rapport. And so I think that's the way that the community has also seen me be on the surface level, and also taking the time to like learn the local language, or ask about the local food, and just take an interest in things that have often been either exploited for tourism or have just been kind of overshadowed. I think that's a really special way to engage with people, and from there, I think people are also more willing to share about some challenges that they're facing, and more in the like, let's work on this together versus, I'm going to tell you what to do. So I say that would be my answer to the first question. And
Then tell us about the film and your work in India and how that led to the film. We'd love to learn more.
Yeah. So after university, I was planning to go to India, and Crystal Thornburg Homsey and I were paired up to do like an interview in a surf magazine. I think it was, I forget which, it was a women's surf magazine that unfortunately, I think is no more, but
that's kind of all magazines, but sure.
Yeah, this is true.
Sadly.
True. So
for our younger listeners, magazines were these things printed on paper.
They had glossy images, and yes, they were delivered to your house sometimes, or you went to a surf shop and could browse through them at the checkout. Anyway, so Crystal and I connected through this interview, and then I had heard about, Sliding Liberia, the film that she had done with her husband, Dave Homsey, incredible cinematographer. And she had expressed her interest in India, and I mentioned that I was heading there just in a few months after graduating. And so we got to speaking, and she had this idea of doing a film that would invite some pretty incredible water women to join her and come to India and see really at that time, surfing was really, really just getting started and blossoming in India. And so to kind of explore that together. And so also looking at highlighting the Kovalam Surf Club. So the surf club that I had been engaged with from afar for 2 years prior. And so I would meet them there, or they would meet me there, and I would join them for part of that journey. And so the film really talks about, I think, seeing surfing beyond the surface, and in a place, India, being just this incredible, dynamic, old, spiritual culture that is facing a lot of challenges, like most places around the world. But how surfing has transformed a lot of lives there, and is transforming them.
Yeah, and that's so cool. I mean, India, just from watching the transformed version, people are going to get a sense of how beautiful and how rich that culture is and how amazing it is. It's really, the imagery is unlike any other surf film you'll see, because it's such a very different place. But I just think it's so cool that it is showing truly how surfing can transform things or transform people. And the Kovalam Surf Project looks really amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit more about their work? I got a sense of it from the film, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you were doing with them, or what they do, and how they help get kids education and create a stable environment.
Yeah, so the Kovalam Surf Club was founded in 2005 by my friend Yali Riloy, who so the Kovalam Surf Club, I should mention, it's under this nonprofit called Sebastian Indian Social Projects, and that's like a social welfare center that works with fishing communities, this one called Vihijam and the surrounding area of Kovalam, so striving to improve the harsh living conditions that many of the people experience. So they offer medical care and food support and microcredit unions and literacy classes, but they also offer a free education for kids who have dropped out of school for a number of reasons. And so my friend Yale was there as part of his social work studies, and he spent most of his free time surfing, but he would see the kids at the beach, and so after school, and so every time he stood up, the kids would cheer, and Yale then was like, well, what about if I teach them how to surf? They can borrow my board, and he kind of had this idea to use it as an incentive tool. So, these kids are not maybe used to sitting at a desk, sort of maybe like me, hyperactive and whatnot.
So you could relate.
I could totally relate. And so basically, no school, no surfing. So if these kids could go to school Monday through Friday, on Saturday and Sunday, they could learn to surf. And so it went from 5 kids and 3 beat up surfboards to actually great equipment and about 40 kids. And it's
That's so great.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And so, it's so cool with the film, Beyond the Surface, like it highlights two of these kids, Ramesh and Krishna, and the power of social media and being connected now. I just was messaging with Ramesh a couple minutes ago, and Ramesh is now working as a surf instructor at the Shaka Surf Club, which is Ishita Maliva's and her partner Tushar, their surf club, Ishita, who's in the film. So he's actually a surf instructor at their surf club. And then Krishna, the other kid who's highlighted there, he's now a surf instructor in Mumbai at the Mumbai Surf School. So incredible.
That's so great.
It's so cool.
Here, youth who came up through the program who are now passing on surfing and empowering others to embrace that, and hopefully that is connecting more people to the ocean. Again, bringing it back. To me, it's all connected, but to connect it for everyone, it's really about connecting more people to the ocean and showing them that connection. And I love Surf Riders. Protect what you love and protect and enjoy sort of MO. And so it's not just about protecting it. It's about also being able to use our waterways. And I think it's great that we're empowering, or that you have been empowering these local communities who maybe wouldn't normally be out there in the water to get out there.
Well, I think, a lot of these communities, when they are out in the water, it's more that the ocean is sort of like a workplace, because they're often, all small scale fisheries. And so it's also sort of changing this perception of the ocean as sort of something we take from and sort of engaging with it as a playground. And I think then, exactly as you mentioned, like protecting what you love, I think that's where that nature play is really special. It builds a different sort of relationship with the marine environment. And and also with the Beyond the Surface film, as you mentioned, like the visuals, Dave is so talented, and this film as well. It was filmed on film, and a lot of the kids in the Kovalam Surf Club and at CISP, they come from what probably can be described as like a fishing slum. Like it's a pretty harsh, life, and they come from backgrounds of abuse, and it's a tough existence, and some of them are born without birth certificates. If we looked back at just documentation of someone, like they don't exist, and so for them to be actually on film, it was like they were forever like etched into history. and
they're famous.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
And I think that's also what spearheaded like my idea with using participatory storytelling, and actually, to kind of bring it back full circle, right after this film, I went back to Lobitos, to Waves for Development. My now partner Nico, he was facilitating this workshop on participatory storytelling, and Dave from Waves had invited a couple different people who had been with Waves back for this workshop. And so Nico and I got to talking, and I was sharing about what I was doing with the kids with surfing, and he was sharing what he was doing. He was facilitating participatory audiovisual workshops with indigenous communities in Peru, and also kids from urban settings to tell their own story, placing the camera in their hands, and with the training to be able to share their own lives from their own perspective. And that really inspired me, and it was coming off of the Beyond the Surface film, just seeing how the kids reacted to being on video. And so that's when this whole idea to start our storytelling movement, Coast to Coast, came about.
Very cool. I love how it's come back full circle, and you not only mentioning that, but mentioning the small scale fisheries that are really happening in so many of these coasts, I think speaks to some of the work that you're doing now. I mean, since the film, you've now gone back to school, you're at Scripps and got a master's, correct?
Yes, in marine biodiversity and conservation.
Right, and then you now are a Fulbright National Geographic scholar, correct? Is that your full title?
I think it's a storytelling fellow.
Storytelling fellow.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. So what does that involve? All I know, and you're also a Pure ambassador, so we can throw that in there. Thank you for representing WSL Pure.
Thank you.
Helping shout it out. But what does that involve? All I know is that you're in Vietnam, like working with small scale fisheries there. You're also going back to Peru later this year. I mean, you haven't slowed down at all, it seems.
It's my ADHD.
So what is the work you're doing now? What is the work you're doing now with these small scale fisheries, and why are they so important? Why do we need to be working with these local communities and coastlines?
Yes. So if you can imagine 3 billion people, so that's the population of India, China, and Brazil combined, rely on fish as one of the primary source of protein.
3 billion with a B on a planet
Yes.
that is 7.5 billion.
Yes, and that is also, I think it's like 500 million people are actually like employed in fisheries, and so I think that's everyone who would have a job in North America if you think about that. So a lot of people rely on fish. And, if fish, it's crazy to think about. It's the last kind of wild species that we hunt. And I always think of it as like, if you have a hunter that's going out into the forest to like shoot a deer, that's one person, shooting an animal, but it's not like you take a helicopter and just like go with a giant net and capture all of these deer, but that's what we're doing to our oceans. I mean, we are depleting them so rapidly. And half of all the global catches of fish are by small-scale fisheries. So these people that are using fish as either for subsistence, eating for subsistence, or for domestic market. So it's really, really
so
important.
50% of all fishing is small-scale, you're saying?
50%, and
wow.
Yeah, and it's of global catches, and then 90% of the fishermen like involved in seafood are small-scale. So it's only about 10% that are these big industrial boats. And just to put it in perspective, I'm throwing out a lot of statistics here, but the U.S., we import 80% of our seafood from other countries. And Vietnam is one of the top, 4 exporters in the world. And so we get a lot of, especially shrimp, but from Vietnam. And so from what I have learned from working in small-scale fishing communities, but through surfing, through storytelling and whatnot, I had the opportunity to apply for this fellowship program, and it entails going. I'm in Vietnam now, and it's working with small-scale fishing communities to understand how low fish availability, so there not being enough fish in the ocean, how does that impact them socially and their social and ecological well-being. So for fishing communities, like fishing sort of buffers against extreme poverty or like food insecurities, because at least you can eat and at least you can sell a little bit for some funding. So definitely fish play different social and environmental and economic and welfare roles for communities. And so my question coming here was really like, what is a fishing village without fish? Like if you just take fish away, what happens? And often these
have you figured out the answer yet?
Oh man, I think maybe chaos.
Wow.
But that's my unpublished opinion at the moment.
All right, we'll wait for the final paper to come out.
But it's quite striking just to see how fish is so interwoven into communities. And I should just mention, like, what really got me interested in fish and going back to get my master's and whatnot. We were with my partner Nico, we were doing a coast-to-coast workshop, photography workshop in Indonesia with a surf club, and this one little girl came back with a photo of a plate of rice and a fried fish. And I asked, well, what's your caption for your photo? And she said, well, rice and fish are best friends, but fish doesn't come around as often, and so rice feels very sad. And that makes me very sad. And I just did, that honestly was when I was like, right, I mean, I'm the person that buys the, nonprofit for dummies book and don't read. So I immediately applied for my master's in marine biodiversity and conservation because I just felt like I got to understand, like, we're actually talking about, really pressing issues here. And so I'm exploring those in Vietnam, but with the affiliation with National Geographic, I'm using this technique called photo voice. So photo voice is this participatory community-based research approach where you actually offer community members cameras and ask them, can you show me what this challenge actually looks like to you? And so, a participant will take a picture and come back, and you will sit down with that person and just look at that image and dissect it, sort of like, okay, so, why did you take that picture? So, and what I love about that is that people say, like, see, now you see what I'm talking about, or like, now you can know what I'm talking about. And also, these are not exotic characters that I think often get portrayed in magazines. These are storytellers. Like they have their own voice. There are no voiceless people. Everybody has a voice. Just some people speak louder than others, and they usually have money and influence. So, giving a camera.
Whatever do you mean?
So giving a camera to someone, it's almost like giving someone a microphone, and it's great because with language barriers, that they say, a picture says 1,000 words. So it's a really, really cool technique. And so I've been here since October, and actually I have to thank WSL Pure, because when we did our paddle out back, I think it was in August for plastic free seas, the WSL Pure had organized these different paddle,
in June?
Yes.
Big paddle out? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, it was back in June. I had organized one in California with my Scripps community, and then I thought, well, these are happening all around the world. I wonder if anyone has done one in Vietnam. And sure enough, this water sports center called Manta Sailing Training Center, based in Mune, Vietnam, they had done a small paddle out. And so I thought, well, I'm going to Vietnam. Like, it would be ideal to be placed in a fishing community that also has some water sports and surfing. And so I reached out to Manta, and we connected through WSL Pure and through this worldwide paddle out. So that was just so cool. And I'm actually here. I'm Skyping from I'm here right now.
That's amazing. That story just like warms my heart. It's so cool. We were so excited to see these paddle outs pop up around the world, and I love that it created connections between surfers in our community. So I'm stoked on that. I had no idea. That's so cool.
Yeah, so rad.
Well, Emi, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for being a voice for the ocean. I mean, you're giving these local communities a voice, but you also yourself are being a voice for the ocean and for these communities. And I think it's just such important work. We have to all work together, at the highest levels of government and business and whatnot, down to the smallest communities and the people on the front lines of all the issues that are facing our ocean. So I think it's so great that you're out there doing it, and I look forward to seeing the output of your work. And who knows what the next thing will be for you? I'm sure it's going to be something where it's a passionate question that you get excited about, and you go, all right, give me a guidebook. I'm reading the intro, and then I'm going to dive in. I'm running for office, whatever it is.
Yeah, I might need to scale that back a little bit, but yes, but I just want to also thank you so much. I mean, thank you for this opportunity to be part of the WSL Pure ambassador team. Like, it's so inspiring to see the WSL taking the initiative to, start doing these like connections and using surfing at such that level to create change. Like, so thank you. I know you're a small team there, and I so appreciate the work that you guys do and bringing people together for the ocean.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's just what we have to do. It's just the right thing to do. We're just doing it. But thank you. So yeah, anything else you want to share?
That I hope everyone who's listening has gotten in the water today and enjoys the ocean.
I love it. Emi, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening. I hope it was a nice conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Emi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emi, for such a fun conversation. We are really proud to have you as one of our ambassadors for WSL Pure, and we're so inspired by your work. If you want to see more of Emi's story, go check out WSL Studios' Transform Season 3, Episode 2, Beyond the Surface, and do go check out the entire film at some point too. But the Transform episode is available now at worldsurfleague.com. It's linked to in the show notes. And I really encourage you to check out the rest of the notes for links to Emi's NGO, Beyond the Surface International, as well as some of her other work like Coast to Coast. And go check out the amazing nonprofits we mentioned, Kovalam Surf Club, Waves for Development. My wife and I have personally volunteered with them. These are great groups out on the front lines in communities that could really use support. So check them out, volunteer with them, support them, be a human being and connect with other people who are in coastal communities, connect with others, share waves, have fun, do good. That's all I got. Catch you next time.
Thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. Keep it locked here on WSL for all the action. And don't forget to subscribe, watch more videos, and leave a comment below.